Cut it out with the water. We don't know if this place is... The voice trails off after it escapes a woman whose hair is held high by a large clamshell hairpin. Oh, hello, I offer as softly as possible to avoid intimidating her, slow to cover my naked body as I consider why she's wearing a lab coat. What the fuck? She asks, an invective might poorly cloaking her mounting fear. My name is Lily. I woke up in a body bag, I say, remembering my name the instant I had to say it. You've been dead for hours. How many? I ask, still ignorant of my role and her unease. You're Lily Garter, right? That's me, I confirm, remembering my name as soon as I needed to again. We received you at 5. What time is it now? It doesn't matter what time it is now. How are you not brain dead? I don't know what to say to her, so I let go of the cord and just shrug. It takes a few seconds for the sound of the pipes shaking and water dripping to be properly absorbed by the room. I saw your body with my own 2 eyes. Disfigured, burned to a pulp. Now you're whole again? Whole? I ask, incredulous. I was worse than this? Because honestly, I feel, well, pretty numb, actually. The woman's throat flares as she murmurs desperately, but gets caught on something when she tries to create distance, falls, and goes limp, filling the room with a gnarly thud on her way down to the floor. I stand there, gormless, before I walk to the door and investigate. She fainted. The sound, while gruesome, was the sound of the hairpiece she was wearing shattering, and not her skull, like I'd initially thought, the bun shape it once kept her hair in having absorbed the fall. I check to make sure she's still breathing, which she is. When I rise from over her, I find that the landing of the staircase beyond the door has a window, and an old tree patiently tapping. I take a beat to consider the way forward. The door, obviously, but if her attention was grabbed to resolve the potential chemical leak, then wouldn't there be other people beyond it as well? Is there more protocol for situations like that? My only experience was with a chem shower so blithely neglected that the water had turned brown. I hadn't even considered that there were more sophisticated chem shower solutions in use. And what am I going to say to those people? Am I going to rely on them to also faint until I walk out of the front door? Or my attention is brought to just beyond the door, to a window. Or perhaps it's more accurate to say arrested by the window. This is the work of the observer, directing me in my great escape. The only issue is that the window and the landing of the stairs doesn't have any latches. My eyes keep darting away from the window, though, and towards the limb of the tree, batting against the window with the intermittent breeze. Am I supposed to break the glass? Wouldn't a morgue be in a police precinct or something? And wouldn't police precincts have shatterproof windows? How am I supposed to shatter that? My focus keeps whipping towards the branch until the observer then suggests the blades of grass that catch the light from what escapes the building, the faint figures under the tree that must be mushrooms, the large green and rhubarb red shafts indicative of healthy, greedy weeds. The plants? It's when I focus on the botany that I understand something I had never yet understood. The observer is plants. Almost. No. The observer is the growth of plants. I understand that I'm being haunted by a process, a chemical reaction, an evolution, a conversion of energy, the essence that pervades the development of flora. I understand that I am no longer just myself, and instead have been made whole again by the manifestation of a particular step in the cycle of life and death, whose rule set and dogma we together have deftly defied. But what the fuck does any of that mean? Now that I've made that connection, the tree has been completely recontextualized. The outside suddenly becomes a blaring cacophony of ingest and export. I become keenly aware of the water the grass is retaining, and the development of bark on the tree, as if each blade and fiber is in my face and yelling what's on its mind. Like I fucking care? Even more than waking up in a body bag, I'm hurled into a confusing, reverberating chorus of cause and effect as I retain the very growth of every plant I'm immediately aware of. The observer springs to action once the stress becomes difficult to bear, and silences swaths of the plants until just the tree is babbling to itself about which leaves absorb the most solar energy and where limbs should stop growing for fear of pruning. The tree is polite, but busy. I'm still recovering from the grass, so while the observer is quite intent on making me listen to it, I'd like to focus on something without roots, like the woman, unconscious, on the floor. She has something I don't. Clothing. And once I get out, I'll need clothing in order to not draw suspicion and be taken right back here, albeit on different pretenses. I managed to disregard the observer's hints and the private considerations of the tree for long enough to strip the mortician of her lab coat. She and I seem to be the same size, and the lab coat is long enough to cover most of the injuries on my thigh. When I look down to learn more about the clearance on the lab coat, I notice that most of the injuries along my thigh are gone. Now, there are scars, gnarly ones where additional, even more pale flesh constitutes where my body sealed off the gouges. I touch them without thinking, and there's a very small amount of residue that strings betwixt my fingers and the scar before it evaporates into a shimmering set of sparkles. Then I run my palm against the injuries on my chest and abdomen, which exude much greater volumes of this sparkly residue. It's a large enough volume that it doesn't immediately dissolve, and I get a better feel for the texture. It's quite hot to the touch, and it seems to be animated on its own. It wriggles and writhes as if it has a better place to be when I play with the goop in my hands. I cup my hand, and the sparkles consequently change in both hue and density as the amalgam's volume dynamic changes. The heat becomes too much to bear, and I start to get grossed out, so I shake off the majority and let the rest dissolve. After a few moments, any evidence the fluid ever existed evaporates into the shower of sparkles off of my hand and the floor. Weird. The observer yet again wrestles my attention to the tree, and in my frustration I ask, "What do you want from me?" Then the tree tells me about its roots. Mighty and strong roots, which have made contact with the concrete and rebar of the foundation, developed, and slowly executed an infiltration plan. If I can hear them, can they hear me? Perhaps. I ask the tree to use those hefty roots to break the glass. It takes a few seconds, but the tiles I stand on slowly begin to jut away from the wall, the corners ripping themselves out of the mortar that once bound them. Some of them crack when they can't free themselves from each other. Then, swift as a crashing car, a crack forms, vertically, directly under the window. After a few more seconds and shattered tiles, the entire window pops out, the sheet of unbreakable glass drifting to my feet. I couldn't break the glass, but I could uninstall it. I take an uneasy step forward, but jump back when a jagged piece of tile cuts my foot. I look at the mortician passed out below me and consider stealing her shoes, but when I find that she's wearing a pair of jet black heels, I resolve to take my chances with the jagged plaster and yawning desert. I leap on the intact glass pane lying above the tile shards, then bound out of the precinct, making sure to pat the tree and thank it before walking away. The grass is a welcome comfort. I bound through the window pane and into the night, my feet tickled by the few blades of grass resilient enough to last in the desert as I walk away from the precinct, guided by the moonlight and the myriad twinkling stars. God, they're just beautiful, and I realize I've never seen them so bright. Not only can I make out the bright constellations from here, but I also pick up on the subtler stars strewn and glacially drifting about, like powdered sugar on pancakes. My first objective is to find a road, figure out where I am. That way, maybe I can make it home, get some clothing, and rest to clear my head. I notice there aren't any police cars while I walk around the building. Kind of weird for a precinct to not have any cars nearby, but it's late, so they're probably fulfilling their quotas, catching drunk drivers. A few sedans and a car that looks like mine if it didn't explode dot the few parking spots, but most are shrouded in dying weeds. Further beyond them is dirt road. This is a bit more isolated than I would have thought. I can make out artificial light fixtures that appear pretty far away, but there aren't any signs or anything over here. It'd be pretty hard to find this place if you didn't already know where it was to begin with. I orient myself towards the light and begin my stride before my ears perk and I hear a door opening. I sidle up to the side of the building, holding the lab coat I'm uh, borrowing together. Someone's onto us, an animatedly angry man hisses while stomping towards the cars. A second pair of footsteps follows suit. What do you mean? Another younger voice asks. They broke the glass and knocked out the coroner. Who knows what they could have stolen? The more stern man clarifies. What do we do? What I'm paying you to do, dumbass. Find them. The observer begins to lapse again, and I'm hit with my anxieties. Why are these men yelling? Why am I so far away from the city? Are things really going to get better when I make it home? In this period of time, the observer, for whatever reason, tunes into those dying weeds. They're tired and thirsty and hate the taste of the oil that drips from those beat-to-shit cars. Their roots are mostly around gravel, which takes energy to break into and harvest nutrients from. They were dormant until a moment ago, when the observer reached out to them. Now they're frustrated, roused from hibernation. The men turn the corner and immediately find and point at me. Well, that was easy, the younger voice remarks. Put your hands up. Who sent you? The more stern man asks. It takes me a second to realize he's talking to me. I'm assuming the paramedics, I respond. Wouldn't you know? What's that supposed to mean? And put your hands up! I, woke up in a body bag, I state, the hand clutching closed the lab coat slower to rise than my free hand. Whoa, boss, look at that, the younger man says as he clicks on a flashlight. The lab coat parted after I put my hands up, and the beam of light magnetized towards my torso. I look down and remember that my wounds, while manageable, still look pretty gruesome. She wasn't lying, the kid manages before running off to the side to barf, moving so frantically that his flashlight points at the older man, and, oh, they're holding guns. Watch where you point that thing, the stern man demands while his partner retches. I'll ask again. Who sent you? He takes another step forward and flicks on a laser sight that obnoxiously hits my eyes before he levels out his aim again. The observer buckles and boosts those brambles while my anxieties return, this time pulling double now that there are guns in the equation. I told you that the paramedics, probably. I only remember being in a car crash. He takes another step forward, and the brambles seethe as they console with the observer and I prodding so much. Likely story, he shouts before pulling on the slide. What else can I say? I don't remember anything else. My name is Lily Garter. I'm 22. I'm struggling to remember anything. Not because of the observer, but because I've never had a gun pointed at me before. I'd go over my options if I had any. I don't have a way to hit him, or take his gun, or run away. Can I distract him? Last time I'm asking, who sent you here? The brambles get louder with each word, and then silence. I'm at a loss for words, but I plead for the brambles to at least help me out if they're going to be so loud. Then a louder disturbance rings out, a car alarm. Then I understand why. The brambles grew around one of the tires and pulled on it until a panic alarm was tripped. The blaring blinkers backlight the bastard, and as the alarm gets louder and rings out for longer, the shoulders of the stern man begin to bunch up in tense suspension, until he curses under his breath and barks at his lackey to do something about me. But by the time he recovers from his sick fit and is back on his feet, I'm gone. My adrenaline kicks it into gear, and suddenly all the brambles are activating the 3 or 4 cars as alarms while I hightail it towards the iridescence of the city. The observer's presence fizzles as I make distance, and I use that as a gauge to determine whether I'm safe. My sprint lasts for a minute, and then the observer tucks himself away again, and I'm alone. I collapse to the ground, my back to the cracked earth. My breath is still caught, and my chest rises and falls irregularly, but I don't care. I don't want to panic. I don't want to feel. I don't want to be. So I stop shivering and breathing and acting like I'm alive to gaze at those stars again for a long, long time. I can make out the belt of Orion, the Ursa Minor and Ursa Major, the Taurus, everything. My heartbeat stops as it's replaced with the steady and broad wavelength of the universe itself, and for a brief moment I feel like I've wedged myself between it, before the artificial lights of an aircraft remind me of my perspective in all this. Just a dead body on the ground that refuses to decompose. I slowly inflate my lungs, careful not to slip into a whooping cough as if my throat wasn't dry enough, and work my way back to my feet, slowly walking the rest of the distance into town.